All right, so we've kind of settled down, which is good. I like the size of the group, which is great. Um, First and foremost, I want to welcome you and thank you for attending this. The entire process is a big commitment. So just coming and visiting me is nice, and I appreciate it. But I know that you're doing more than that. So I just wanted to show my appreciation, and I'll try to do my best to kind of open the door for discussion. I don't want to talk at you, but I do want to let you know what the committee's doing. Not everything that is going on I'll touch on. So when I forget things, maybe Chris Areno, who's a very active member on my committee, can lean in. Um, or if you have questions or want to interrupt or have thoughts or concerns, just do so. Raise your hand or just scream out, whatever it might be. I think I've got everybody on a screen in front of me, so I should be able to see you. So what I'll do is just try to click through a few slides that have been kind of dragging along with me as we've kind of reinvigorated the committee and pushed our agenda forward, so to speak. So what we're really trying to do with the committee is kind of talk about resilience for us as structural engineers. And if your hand is going to be raised, and what the heck is resilience anyway? That's why I came to listen to it. It's really the recovery of a community. You have to have a number or a group of people or things, kind of an organic structure that is not just a singular entity like a building. It can be you as a person can be resilient and recover because you have some control over the situation, but it is an active process. So resilience doesn't come through your design. You don't design resilient buildings, and that's our primary focus, to tell you the truth, is to educate everyone that you don't design resilient buildings and they're not sustainable necessarily. So what we try to do is take that education broader than just the few of us that are on the committee and maybe active within NCSEA, and really try to get it out there for all the structural engineers to know and use in their day-to-day life. And when we provide those educational materials, we're doing it in a bunch of different ways, whether it be presentations or papers or articles, or just communication like this. This is what we're kind of pursuing, and always trying to be thoughtful about what we're doing there. So some of the things that we've done in 2020 and 2021, if you've been paying attention to us, which is hard because there's so much else going on, and why would you join another Zoom call when you've already got at least 6 a day, is we gave a wildfire hazard presentation at the summit. So if you attended that, two of our shining stars, and especially Erica, are really experts in wildfire hazard and the development therein. It's a very new hazard. There's not a lot known about it. So it'd be like watching, I don't know, Hausner talk about earthquakes, or maybe Carl Winkler talking about how to deal with buildings about earthquakes. We're talking about stuff that happened, potentially 100 years ago in earthquake engineering. So very, very early in the process, and Erica's right on top of it, and she's involved in our committee and contributing quite a bit to NCSEA. So we're super excited about that. We think that's a big win. I'm currently, Chris and I were talking about it when just a few of you were getting on the phone. I'm reviewing our article on COVID being an actual natural hazard. And nobody really thought that would actually be a representative hazard for us to discuss in a resilience context, but it's been great. It's a really nice stress test of what we think about recovery as a community, and how it folds into some of the things that we talk about when we discuss resilience and we discuss performance-based design or contribution to recovery. All of those things are actually applicable here. And we've got some changes and some thoughts about what it is that we're trying to get back to. And it's what we're introducing. And it's not our original concept, but we're introducing it to us as structural engineers as adaptive resilience. And so that's a new concept that we hope to get in Structure Magazine sooner than later, and then in other venues, and we'll present that. A great facilitation between MOs. We had Sione ran as a member of our committee and very interested in pushing forward Sione's success as a resilience committee within our MO. And we have Jonathan Buckaloo, who's leading the charge, and Anna Lang is leading the charge for SEOC in California. And they thought it would be a smart idea to have a LinkedIn page so that they could communicate. And so they were fortunately considering us as NCSEA to hang a banner on it. So they tucked it underneath NCSEA, and we have a LinkedIn page. So now we have opportunities for MOs to to basically put up what they want, and not to do it individually, because that doesn't make sense, but to share it on a national level. So reach out and try to find that if you can. We've got some committee growth happening. We've got a couple members, and some people are kind of kicking around and kind of participating more, which is great. That's always a good sign for us. And we'd really love to see some more participation. We meet monthly, and so we're more than happy to have people duck in and duck out, or be there every month. And we do have a pretty good core of hardworking, very conscientious people, much smarter than myself, and much more involved in really great kind of ideas. So what we want to do is just make sure that we've got lots of opportunity for everybody out there, and hopefully to help MOs develop their own resilience groups and those discussions, because it's really about local efficacy. So what we want to do in 2021 to 2022 is we're going to continue pushing that wildfire hazard and those discussions. There's lots of leadership that's coming out of our group there. We've got this COVID article, really adaptive resilience article, that will be expanding and continuing. And then we want to continue to grow the committee and also grow MO participation, if you will, so that there are resilience committees out there, and help them start being more successful, or interlinking, because we see that there's a lot of push now for legislative work associated with resilience recovery, that kind of thing. We still anticipate having monthly meetings. These are all, and they've always been remote, just like we're doing here. Very much the same, right? Show something up on screen and put all of us in windows. So we've been doing that for a long time before COVID. And now it's just facilitated that even more so. But we will return back to an in-person meeting at the summit. So if you're there attending the summit, you can come by and observe our meeting. We're more than happy to have you there, and would love to have you there. So we'll have a little Q&A time. I think we've got, quite a bit of time, if I remember right, 15 or 20 minutes or something. We've got plenty of input available here. Me as chair, but we also have Chris as a very active member, and very involved in the flood side of the world and resilience. Ryan Kirstein, I see, is on the phone, and Ryan led an effort to create just a phenomenal document that helps the world kind of align on resilience the way that we've been talking about it for a number of years. So as I reviewed that today to get on a call with Don Scott, who I also see is on the call here, who's leading the SEI Resilience Committee, that we've got lots of push in the right direction about resilience being about communities, and then our contribution as structural engineers is really about the built infrastructure and trying to make it fit some resilience planning efforts, that kind of thing. Jonathan's on, so he can talk about earthquakes and what's going on in California, and of course Chris can talk about what's going on in New York. So hopefully we could have some questions if we got them. Don't want to talk the whole time. Of course, I should have introduced Ed right away, right? We got to bow to the president as soon as we can. But thank you, Ed, for joining the call. And we're happy that you're driving the ship. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for hosting this. I'll kick off with a question.
Sure.
And I think I heard you right at the beginning here. And I think that this whole, obviously, there's a lot of focus on the messaging surrounding resilience, and what is the message that NCSEA wants to, and the structural engineering profession wants to get out there about resilience and our role in it. But you said something at the beginning of the meeting, and just want you to maybe elaborate on that. You said that we don't, as structural engineers, we don't design resilient buildings. I think I heard you right. We don't design sustainable buildings. Can you elaborate on that part of your message? And
sure.
And, thanks. Yeah, just do that.
Yeah, no, it's one of the toughest things to do, because we as engineers work in hammers and nails, right? We don't work in nuance, which is more like fringe and cushion. So resilience is the recovery. I'm just going to say it's a recovery side of things. It's far more complicated than that. But if you think about a major event, whether it be a flood, a hurricane, an earthquake, a wildfire, that event disrupts normalcy. So you're, going to the grocery store every day, no problem, no mask, everything's kind of normal as it was in maybe 2019. Out of the blue, we get an earthquake, and that earthquake kind of causes buildings to collapse and people scramble, and you're not working anymore, and you're just trying to get back to normal. And how quickly you can do that, or how successfully you can do that, like get back to what it was in 2019. That is resilience. It's the ability to recover. And so that's a community thing when it comes to what we do. It isn't necessarily a human thing, although humans can do it. So when we talk about resilience, we don't make buildings resilient. We actually design buildings so that they perform in a certain way to contribute to that resilience discussion. So from a planning standpoint, that can be important. You don't need every single building in the world to be fully functional. And we're seeing that now, right? There's a whole lot of empty office buildings and have been for a while, and there'll be more. We don't need them operational. We don't need them available to us in recovery necessarily. So maybe they're not part of that planning discussion on how the community is going to respond. So be it. That's fine. We can design that building so it's code compliant. It's anticipated to be safe. It will be safe, but it may not necessarily be immediately occupiable after an event, and it may not be functional after an event. That's good. Totally fine, as long as you plan for it. Smart communities then will say, well, which buildings are important for us to make sure that they're functional, if you will, after an earthquake? And that's a whole other kind of description of kind of what it is that we're trying to do with buildings. And there's a NIST document that actually does a really great job of defining that. And Ryan can speak to that a little bit. So we might say as a community, well, I think I want a hospital or maybe a bunch of hospitals. I think I might want a gym, maybe a bunch of gyms so that we had a shelter. Maybe I want housing, and I want a bunch of housing so that people aren't out on the street with nowhere to live. And there's lots of evidence about how to do that and how to think about it and how to execute it from a design standpoint. And then hopefully we as structural engineers are guiding that discussion. And then they turn to Ed and they say, okay, Ed, you're designing the hospital. So can you make sure that we're actually going to design that hospital to return to functionality defined as this following an earthquake? And you say, great, no problem. And so then you invoke your performance-based engineering tools and can actually identify that I did something that I think is going to get us there. And these are the reasons why, and that we now have contributed to overall resilience. So that's a resilience side. It's very long and complicated, but for us as functional structural engineers, it's to be the smartest guy in the room related to this stuff, say the right thing at the right time, and then know that we can contribute by developing or helping develop or design buildings that can contribute in ways that planners think are important. That's not really going to be our job, but our job is going to be saying, yeah, you can make a high performance building, or you can take an existing building and make it high performance. And we have all those tools to do that. The sustainability piece is actually more about that ASE put us kind of on our back foot a number of years ago, at Structural Congress, where they said, come see sustainability and resilience talks. And all of the talks started to intermix them and say that, this building is completely resilient and will actually reduce the carbon footprint to blah, 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 blah. And it was just 100% wrong. And it actually affected a lot of people where they thought they were interchangeable, and they're not. Resilience is exactly what I explained earlier. Sustainability is contribution to the overall, I'll call it environmental well-being or the ecological well-being of an existing condition or a future condition. And our contribution therein is, one, can we, limit it? That's the first thing that we're trying to do. But can we actually maintain a reasonable level? So we're sustaining that level of development without depleting resources. So it's a totally different goal. But what we're exploring in the SEI resilience group, and we're bringing it into as we get some time in the NCSEA resilience group, is how those two things actually may intermix. And if we can educate everyone to understand that when that conversation starts, we can talk about, well, you just talked about resilience and you talked about sustainability. We know that we can contribute that as structural engineers because we can actually help you understand the cost, whether it be direct cost or resource related cost or resilience-based cost or sustainability-based cost of making those decisions. And we can help run those analyses. While they're not precise and in the weeds like we're normally used to, we can actually utilize some decision trees and actually apply the right cost to them and help people understand how to make better decisions. And that's our goal, is to get everyone educated enough to be contributing to that conversation, because there's some really bad decisions that are being made, right? It's like, you know what, we're just going to make this, out of wood because that's super sustainable. Well, it actually isn't if it is a certain type, or it doesn't work for the area that you're in, or whatever else it might be. And we're the ones that need to tell people that. And that's that sustainable discussion. Although there's lots of changes you could make, like use more fly ash, and then we can be more sustainable. So we have a lot of information where we can plug that into those discussions and help our architect friends do a little bit better along those lines. So hopefully, nice long answer, Ed. Hopefully I got it all covered. I don't think you have any more room to ask any more silly questions like that, but it's a good one to start with. Thank you. I did get a question in the chat. How do you become a member of the committee? I did forget to kind of describe the characteristic of the committee. At first, we had started out as kind of tucked under the Code Advisory Committee under Tom DeBlasi. And that doesn't make a lot of sense on how we operate. There is no resilience kind of codes, and we work outside of that environment. And it really makes sense because we're trying to push for education and we have a broader reach to pull it out and have an individual committee that kind of operates directly under the board. So that was our first step when I took over as chair. And fortunately, I think Ed was on the board at the time during that decision. That was supported. And so we're an independent body, and we can actually manage ourselves as it makes some sense. And that's important because the Code Advisory Committee actually has some pretty strict rules on regional representation. So we don't have that. We don't have regional representation rules, although we do like to get participation from areas throughout the country. I currently don't have an overwhelming number of members. To be a true member, that means that you actually get your expenses covered as a committee member to participate at our in-person meeting once a year. And what it takes to get that, in my world, you have to earn stuff. I was joked with my teacher friends. If I was a teacher, I would tell every kid when they walked in the door, all right, you all have Fs, and you're going to work your way up to an A. And my teacher friend tells me you can't do that. You actually have to start with everybody has an A, and they're going to fail themselves down to an F. But I don't think that's good. I think we got to work for positive, right? So same thing with my committee is you get to be an observer, and when you put in a lot of effort and you really become a participant and you're starting to lead our discussions or develop documentation or really contribute, and it's worthy of our members' investment, because that's what we're using is our members' money to actually participate. Then I'll bring you in as a full member, which gives you that reimbursement opportunity. And fortunately, I have to be pretty careful about it. I have some really active and contributing members, and they get the support that we need, but their participation is very, very high. And of course, they're always wearing their NCSEA hat. So the quickest way to make all that happen is to send me an email. I think you can get my email on the NCSEA website. Otherwise, it's pretty easy. ksmoore@sgh.com. And I'll start putting you into the mix, and you'll get a monthly announcement for our meetings, hopefully more than 10 minutes before it happens, although that sometimes happens. And then we just meet on that monthly basis. Sometimes we do some stuff offline, and then we meet once a year at the summit. I got another question. Are meetings open to the engineering public? Where can meetings be watched or followed? So generally, NCSEA committee meetings aren't really open to the public. We don't announce outside of NCSEA, and typically don't announce beyond our members. We have things posted to contact the chair or get involved in a calendared meeting or something like that. But we basically send these announcements just to those people who are on our email list. So if you want to get involved, again, you got to reach out to me or reach out to the office, but you want to make sure that you're somehow getting us information that you're interested. And then if you have other people that are interested, let's say we're going to give some kind of webinar or something, and you've kind of learned that as we're talking, is to, as a representation, if you're an MO representative, is to reach out to your group that you have some influence on, recognize that this is coming, and then make us aware or just attend. Because a lot of what we do that's worth watching, we'll put out in webinar form. And so then it's the same kind of stuff you do with any NCSEA webinar or information that we're going to share. So all good questions, and definitely, we want people to be interested, participating. It's way out of the beaten track, so we're not talking WL²/8. We're not talking about, how to interpret code provisions. We're talking about very new ideas, how to incorporate them into what you do, reviewing documents that are, hot off the presses, but written by, members that we know, I refer to this NIST document that Ryan put together. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that is a nationally funded document that's talking about how do we actually get ourselves in a better position to recover from natural hazards. And that's a very important point because it extends beyond earthquakes. We've done that a long time for earthquakes, but now we're going to try to apply this to every natural hazard that we can think of. And so it does a great job of introducing our knowledge and our kind of collective response to natural hazards over time. A lot of that is in earthquakes and floods and hurricanes. But the wildfire discussion is becoming a little more prevalent, and communities are starting to respond. So it really sets up a framework for those actively trying to manage that process to think about, this is what you want to do, X, Y, and Z, and then plug in people in the right spots. And so resilience is actually just part of that, but mostly it's about functional recovery and how to actually get yourselves back to where you want to be as a community in the best way possible using the tools that we have. Hopefully I didn't butcher that up too much, Ryan.
No, I think you did a good job, Kevin. And I think that, I would say that resilience is probably still a fairly emerging topic. Good chance that many SCAs don't have a standalone resilience committee, but there might be resilience conversations happening on the side of their code committee or even of their board. Maybe your SCA is hearing that your state is trying to consider how to reduce damage from the next hurricane or to improve recovery time from the next flood or next earthquake. And those are the topics that NCSCA is talking about. Those are the topics that are kind of covered in that FEMA NIST report. And I would just encourage you, if your SCA is hearing about those sorts of things, whether they're legislative or code amendments and that sort of thing, to reach out to Kevin and the NCSCA crew, because there's definitely wording that's important. And there's definitely strategies that are being studied by other states that you might want to get connected to. So.
Yeah, that reminds me, definitely a parting shot. The environment around legislation associated with what Ryan's speaking to and what I was mentioning in this NIST report is really gaining some traction, and it's very different state to state. However, our approach can be a little bit more strategic from state to state, kind of at a national level of coordination and collaboration, if you want to think about it that way. So in California, we've worked really hard to pursue, I'll call it functional recovery because it's more than that. But anyway, how to actually get us better prepared for earthquake response. And some of the lessons learned there aren't just about the hazard, but they're actually about the process and things that we've learned about how to engage in a legislative environment. And while there's many of us that are actually really good at that and do that for a bunch of different topics, sometimes it helps if you actually know the topic and a resilience thing comes up, we can give you kind of a twofold, lessons learned or tips and tricks. So Ryan's definitely right. If you hear or see about, anything that we can actually help you succeed on a localized basis, we want to make sure that, there's some pretty deep resources in NCSCA and certain MOs that have actually done quite a bit of work in this venue. So it's a tough road. I mean, Ryan actually for SEOC does quite a bit of work locally, and I don't know how much time he spends, but it seems like it's a lot. And most of it is kind of off the clock, so to speak. Not just, are we not paying attention to it at his firm, but it's after hours or super early or whatever it is. So it's almost every lunch hour and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of people doing that. If we can connect you, that would be great. Any other questions? Pretty quiet. Tired of hearing me, I'm sure, which is okay. Hopefully everybody's.
Well, Kevin, I got one more. If everyone else is going to be silent.
Okay.
You mentioned adaptive resilience and COVID. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction between resilience and adaptive resilience?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tee up the article that's forthcoming, right? I don't want to give away the store. I want everybody to go find it and read it. But I'll give you the quick overview that hopefully gains some interest. So the classic resilience model, there's actually a triangle that we use. And so if you envision a typical XY graph, and on the left is 0 time, and on the right is, years, let's say. And your functionality of a building or a community or something is kind of cooking along at some level, right? And that level is where you are on the y-axis. So I'll just use earthquakes because it's easier for me to talk about because I'm in California. So earthquake happens, and the functionality drops, right? And for those of you that experience an earthquake or even a flood or hurricane or whatever, things stop, right? You don't go to the store, people quit spending money. You may not be able to work. You may be struggling to actually save your life or others' lives. So it's a complete stop of normalcy. And so we envision that as whatever that functionality level might be drops to almost zero or something. And then we recover, right? That's just what we've always done as the human race, is we recover. And that recovery has a slope. And that slope then gets us back to normal. Right? And we get back to that line and we continue along. And that's called the recovery triangle. So what we're finding with COVID, and we found it with other events, but we're still always thinking like engineers, and we're trying to get back to normal or maybe better than normal. But COVID is unique in the fact that, it's different, right? And we're okay with it as society. And we're going to adapt where that target is to have us return. And so when we talk about adaptive resilience, there's lots of moving parts in a community recovery, and why we think about, we got to get back to normal. That's kind of the thing that we always say and discuss. Society may not want that. They may not be pushing for that, may not have the resources for that. And so we have to be careful on how we're actually recovering, and that adaptive resilience is a recognition that you don't have to actually get all the way back to normal, or you potentially need to get beyond it. And that's something that you can actually measure and pay attention to. And it can contribute to what's called the management cycle. So there's lots of good information that's in there that is new, that NCSEA is going to kind of hold close to us and help educate those outside of us. But it's playing off some earlier work, trying to bring it to a little more simple expression, and then make it a little bit more useful for those of us that are in those discussions. But COVID's a great opportunity for us to kind of express it with something that everybody knows and has experienced. Excellent question, Ed. Thank you. Took us right to the end. So we got a minute or so. So I really, again, appreciate everybody attending. As I think it's in the chat, you've got lots of ways to get in touch with us through the NCSU website, through my email, through any of your local representatives. All those people have the ability to get to me, and we'll respond and get you involved. All right.